Okay, so tip number one, your bottom shaft of your Equinox does not have a drain hole. So at the bottom here where it joins the coil, there is no drain hole. So if you hunt in salt water, or any water for that matter, and you submerge the detector, when you come home, you really need to take this bottom part of the shaft off and clean it out, rinse it out, because there's no drain hole. I've filled it up with water. I don't know if you can see down in there, but it's still full of water. There's nowhere for the water to get away. I'll show you. I filled it up with water and it's still full of water. So if that was salt water, that could be pretty nasty. So you have to take the shaft apart and empty the water out of it. Or another option is to drill a hole in the bottom of the shaft down here somewhere so the water can get away. So just remember that when you're finished for the day, particularly if you've been detecting in salt water, make sure you take the bottom part of the shaft off and flush it out with fresh water and drain the water out so that you don't damage the shaft, or doesn't start rusting from the inside out. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, if you've got a few different coils, say you've got the 11-inch coil, the 6-inch coil, 15-inch coil, it can take a bit of time to swap these coils over. You've got to undo that bolt there and take the little rubber pieces out, put it all back together. It can take quite a long time. Speed that up. You can buy this bottom part of the shaft separately from lots of different Minelab suppliers. Every time you buy a new coil, get one of those shafts, connect it to your coil and leave it connected, and then you can just swap out the bottom part of the shaft. This is the releasing spring-loaded piece that you just push in, and then you can slide this off, put it back into the midsection, and it'll clip into place, and this will keep it there. And then that will allow quick changeover of coils. That's tip number two. Alright, so that brings us to tip number three. When you wind your coil cable around your shaft, obviously it needs to be fairly well wound so it's not down loose, hanging loose, because if it's hanging loose it could snag on something and it could damage the cable, but it can also give you electromagnetic interference and cause the machine to chatter. But the most important point I want to make is this point here, from the coil up to this point here. There needs to be enough slack in the cable so that if you bend the coil in any direction, it doesn't pull on this bit of the cable. A lot of the time people will wind it quite tightly around here, and then over the time where they move their coil back and forth, it degrades the cable and causes an issue here where it joins the coil. So you just want to make sure that you give it enough slack when you're installing the cable. Give it enough slack. Fix it at this point here where there is enough slack, and then wind it from this point here back up the shaft so it's nice and snug, and back into the control box. So that will make sure that you don't damage your coil or your cable. So that's tip number three. Tip number four, if you use your headphones quite a lot, you'll find that if you don't turn them off after you're finished for the day and you go to use them again in a week or 2 weeks time, they'll be flat or very close to it. Just remember to turn them off. I've done this myself a few times. You've had a big session, 4 or 5 hour hunt, and you've just put them back in the car and forgotten to turn them off and just put them away with your gear. So obviously to turn them on, you just push the power button in till they fire up. To turn them off, what you're looking for and you're listening for is the giveaway tone. So you hold the power button in and you'll hear a tone, and you'll see the LEDs up here will flash red, and now they're off, and that will not be using any more power until the next time. So make sure you turn them off. It's easy to forget. That's tip number four. So this brings us to probably the most important tip, tip number five. When you've finished detecting at the beach in particular, or anywhere that's gravelly or sandy, anything like that, you need to take the coil cover off, the skid plate off, and empty out all the sand and give it a clean. Because in here, in these little holes that run underneath the coil, sand gets trapped in here, and that can really upset your machine. It can cause chattering, it can cause just generally bad issues and bad conditions for your detector. So get into the habit of taking your skid plate off, cleaning all this out, and then replacing the skid plate. It's pretty easy to put back on. You'll notice here that is different to the rest of the coil. You just line that piece up with the skid plate, snap it back on. Just work your way around. It's a bit hard with one hand, but put it into position, snap it back on around the edges, and in the center, and you're good to go. Don't forget to do that though, because if you have a build-up of sand, particularly if it's black sand or mineralized sand, it will really upset your detector. Don't forget to do that regularly. So that's it for this lot of tips. Please like and subscribe if you found the video useful, and I'll catch up with you with your next video. And in the meantime, good luck hunting. I hope you find lots of cool stuff. Catch you next time.